Good morning, Snugglebugs, and welcome back to another Hearthstone video. Today we're going to be covering the top 5 decks since Onyxia's Lair mini set released a week ago today. A little caveat there, I'm actually going to be showcasing 6 decks, and that's because as per the data shows, there are 2 decks that are technically tied for 5th place, at least according to what I was looking at on hsreplay.net. I will maybe put a link to that website in the description below. If you're not used to using or not familiar with this website, it is a website where you can go to and look at different deck lists and archetypes, how they're performing, specifically what cards they're in, as well as bring their deck codes into Hearthstone. We're playing in Legend with at least 1,000 games played in standard rank. So with that out of the way, we'll take a look at our number 5 deck, or at least one of the 2 that are tied for number 5. And that will be the Aggro Druid. Not a lot has changed in this deck. In fact, looking over it kind of right now, I don't think anything has changed since the Onyxia's Lair mini set. The main concept, of course, is to just sort of get out early, especially things like peasants. So there it is, sorry, Razormane Battle Guard, which makes your taunts cost 2 less. And of course, since almost every single taunt in this deck costs 2 or less, it's more or less just a free 2/2 because you play him, then maybe you play your like encumbered pack mule for free, and all of a sudden for 2 mana you have 4/3, half of the body of which has taunt. And then you have your RMD Trogs, of course, since there are a lot of spell decks out there right now. That alone can sort of take over the early game against almost anyone. And then you have Oracle of Elune, which is probably one of your main win conditions, like say mid-game, where you just wait till you maybe have 4 or 5 mana. You play the Oracle of Elune, and then maybe you do play something like your Razormane Battle Guard if you have 5, and that gives you the ability to play another thing for free, and you get a full wide board for like 5 mana. Drekthar, similar kind of idea, not a full board, but you can get up to 3 minions out, and honestly, again, if you have 5 mana and you happen to pull an Oracle of Elune, then maybe play like an IMD Trog. Again, your board gets crazy full. The hope is that at one point you can keep one of your wide boards open to do things like buffing a single minion for with Mark of the Wild and Mark of the Spike Shell, and then play Arbor up to just give, say, 4 or 5, hopefully, minions, plus 2 attack, and you just kind of go face. I think this deck, if anything, I mean, it was already one of the stronger decks pre-expansion, and I believe one of the reasons it's managed to stay, if not maybe I think even had a bit of a higher win rate now, sticking at about a 56.2. A lot of decks have been trying to, I guess, experiment / play with the Kazakhstan card that had come out recently. And one of the things I had noted in my one of my other videos is that I think it was with the Quest Hunter, one of the tricks now to winning, not that aggro wasn't already pretty popular, but it's just go, okay, you're right, Kazakhstan is powerful. Treasures are nearly difficult to defeat. Let's just win before they can get it out. In saying that, almost strangely tied in with about the same win rate, of 56.2, is the Aggro Druid, is actually the Ramp Druid. And it takes that exact opposite approach, kind of what I was just talking about that aggro can be, or is really good against, and that is they spend their entire early game ramping up, trying to draw cards, surviving with things like the Bog Beams if they get 7 mana without drawing their stuff, and the Lunar Eclipses, and then they will win with Kazakhstan or like Raid Boss Onyxia, Malygos, I guess, just to draw more of your spells, and things like that. And we've highlighted not this exact deck because we did not play Malygos, or I don't think we played Ironbark, but we highlighted a deck similar to this, and we had some good feedback that it was a deck people like to see. So maybe I'll take this deck list, or the spell druid deck list that Zeddy was using, or something close to that, and maybe we'll try to highlight that a bit more. But so the point of this deck, as mentioned, is we kind of go through with our Innervates and Lightning Blooms to try to get Wild Growth or Overgrowth or even Guff down as early as possible to ramp up to 8 mana. Then we draw into the Kazakhstan with either Guess the Weights or Moonlit Guidances, and then we just play it, get our treasures, pick whatever treasures fit best for your current situation. Most of the time, I guess, damage ones are the best because you already have some resources to live, either with your classic Solar Eclipse Cenarian Ward, if that all happens before the treasures. It is obviously slower than aggro Druid, but since a lot of the times you can ramp up and even not force draw, but you have enough draw that you're likely to get Kazakhstan early. And honestly, I think it's a lot of fun. I know there's some discussions going on where people think Guff himself may be a bit too powerful. Not to jump on the typical bandwagon, maybe with some other people, but I actually don't think Guff himself is really a problem. I think, you know, hero cards are meant to be powerful. Sure, maybe make him 6 mana, but honestly at 5, I don't even think he's super overpowered. Not to derail our conversation about the deck lists, I think what makes him overpowered is the fact that, or what makes him feel overpowered is just the fact he's played a lot. A lot of people play him in like almost all kinds of Druid decks anyway, right? So you see him all over the place. But it's honestly Lightning Bloom, Innervate to some extent, but I mean Innervate I think is a Druid classic card that will probably never be removed from the pool. But Lightning Blooms, things like your Overgrowths and Wild Growths. And the reason I say that is because, you know, being able to go up to 20 is awesome. But of course, you know, there's got to be, like, every deck has its thing. And if you have to spend half your deck getting there, then it's not super strong. But what ends up happening is when you can go, like, you know, Innervate Wild Growth into Overgrowth and maybe even Lightning Bloom into Wild Guff in a couple of turns. Like, if you get Guff out on, like, turn 1 or 2, then yes, way too strong. I think if you actually have to wait until turn 4 or 5 to get Guff, and that's if you have him in your opening hand, then no, I think he's, you know, a strong and powerful card, sure, but he has 0 like impact on the board, and even 2 mana draw a card constantly, you know, that's not much different than like a lot of the upgraded Warlock hero powers and stuff. So with a lot of those cards rotating out, I'm hoping to see Guff fall back into a pretty good spot. Kind of segue into our 4th place deck. Now, I feel kind of bad that these all seem to be in the same spot, but at about a 56.9% win rate, we have the Spell Druid. I don't know if this is the exact deck list, say, that Zeddy was running, but I do know Zeddy had a lot of success last week with a Spell Druid, and there was a lot of discussions on his channel in regards to like the power level. And like I say, Guff, hence the conversation, I guess, that we just had. This is very close to the deck we were just looking at. I had thought about not including it for that reason. However, I actually do think that the additions of Glowfly Swarm, Arbor Up, and the removal of some of the other like earlier game spells and the Wild Growth and the Innervates make this different enough to me, as it does have this Kazakhstan raid boss Onyxia endgame. What it really also wants to do is it wants to dominate the early game and win the mirror matches, right? Which I think maybe is why it has a slightly higher win rate. And I say this because, like, if you look at the decks here, right, say they both get a relatively early ramp curve, what would the other deck be able to do that I showed a second ago, or a minute ago, against, like, you know, a full board Glowfly Swarm? Not a ton, right? That's one of the weaknesses to the typical ramp druid. You know, they could have, I guess, their Lunar Eclipse, if they have 7 mana Bog Beams, things like that. But that would be most of their entire hand, right? And that have to be perfect. And if they don't answer, and they say leave even 4 or 3 or 4 of these Glowfly Swarms up, and then you Arbor Up, and all of a sudden you have a board of like 4 3s, and you're hitting them face, they won't have a chance to play Kazakhstan, right? So this deck, I think, if you're facing a lot of, say, the ramp druid-y style decks, or even a late game maybe priest type things, and you want to play a ramp druid or Kazakhstan druid, this deck list I think is the way to go, as it does a similar thing to those. Maybe it's just a touch slower without the Innervates and the Wild Growth, but it can also handle other slower decks with the Glowfly Swarm Arbor Up kind of combination. That's why I included it in the list, and this would be our number 4. The number 3 deck on the list is one that I have a feeling that nobody really wants to see on these lists. I think this archetype, the Face Hunter, has been on a top deck list, pretty much since the game has been released, to my knowledge, some iteration, shape, or form. And I mean, we all know the meme of Face is the place, and that Hunter, that's just kind of always something that they've been good at. To be fair, I think, again, this is conversations that people have had. Just even the hero power, the nature of the hero power alone kind of limits the design a bit, in the sense of, like, you know, it's hard to discuss making a control hunter deck actually work properly when you got a hero power that just hits damage, true damage to face. Now we have seen some mid-range hunters and yes, some semi-control hunters do half decently well in the past, but I think face hunter honestly is just a classic that will never go away. Currently sitting at 57.4% win rate on average. As you can see too, the strange thing is nothing new. This is pulled straight from HS Replay with the filters that there are over 1,000 games played, and since Onyxia's Lair came out last week. With that, I guess there's probably not much else to talk about. I think we've all either played against enough of these face hunters to really know what they're doing. Our top 2 deck in the meta since Onyxia's Lair had come out, a deck to which I had just very recently highlighted on my channel, the Aggro Shadow Priest. I do not have the Serena Bloodfeather, but that being said, our deck really wasn't different other than that. This deck also has kind of been around since United in Stormwind. So this deck has been around kind of off and on through United in Stormwind. It's been strong, and then it kind of got weaker, and then it got strong again. And I think a similar reason to the Aggro Druid, the main reason this deck has kind of come back into popularity is just the rise of Kazakhstan decks, people trying to go slow. When I was playing this deck, the amount of games that I would go turn 1, play Iron Deep Trog, and literally have people surrender, just goes to show you that this card is still, I wouldn't say overpowered, just because honestly I think tech cards exist for that reason. And I just think people, the fact it doesn't keep buffs anymore, I definitely think makes it a much more balanced card. But anyway, or peasants to draw your cards, and then of course you get 3 or 4 minions out. You play your Void Touched Amulet, Void Touched Attendant, and buff some things with Wriggling Horror. And all of a sudden you're hitting, I think at one point I had already done something like 8 or 9 damage on turn 2 with this deck. You get Mancrick just to put in that random 3 damage that can also be discovered with your Thrive in the Shadows. Najak Hexen to potentially take either a early game minion just for tempo and like keep using that to hit face, or take a late game taunt if it gets that far. Some Void Shard for direct damage, honestly. I mean, yes, the lifesteal is good, but at that point I just think if you need to heal 4, you might already be losing, kind of thing. Probably the key card, and one of the only legendaries I would definitely say is like mandatory, would be the Archbishop Benedictus. Dark Bishop Benedictus. And of course, this is because he's the one that if you start your game with all shadow spells, you start with Shadow Form, which kind of is the hero power that does 2 damage instead of healing 2, which is kind of... And then just to finish it off, as a lot of aggro decks would have, we have our Mr. Smite at the end, or the highest point of our mana curve. Instead of it being like a pirate specific card, really it's just meant to hear, similar to Leroy of old, of just play it to hit face for 6 and hope that ends the game for you. I'll be perfectly honest, the deck that's in the first top rated spot with over a 60% win rate kind of surprised me a little, just because I haven't run into it a crazy ton. Usually when I run into the class, it's much more control-y. So I guess without further ado, let's just hop into it. And our number 1 win rate deck as of HS Replay with a 61.8% win rate since Onyxia's Lair's release, Burn Shaman. I mean, I guess it's got the... I was going to say, the reason why it surprised me is because, Bolner OTK, or, the freeze board to get you with like Mutanus control-y style shamans is what I used to run into the most. And it has most of that same package, but what they've decided to do is shift it into and then burn your face. Like, we're going to freeze your board with things like Wildfire Cavern and Wind Chills, and then we're going to go face with our Frostbites, our Lightning Bolts, and use our Serpent Shrine portals and things like that. And then get to your Brucon for the kind of late game fireball aspect of it with its calling elemental. Multicaster, of course, to draw into all of those things. Primordial Studies to get more spell power. Overdraft to do damage. So I guess the point of this deck here is to kind of control early. You have your Brilliant Macaws to either duplicate your freezes or even just your Instructor Fireheart to get more burn as fast as possible and just kind of go face. Again, I think similar reasons is most decks have learned that in any form of control match, you're going to lose to a deck playing Kazakhstan if they are playing like a control Kazakhstan, or even just like ramp or the priest Kazakhstan, which is just get it out as early as possible. Learning that, hey, most decks are doing this strategy, and they're going to be for at least a while until the meta settles, which after 7 days I still don't think it has completely, so I wouldn't recommend crafting too many of these, especially if you need more than, say, one legendary or something, because with rotation probably coming in April, so like a month and a half, as well as, you know, the meta could shift again in a week now that people have realized that aggro's back. Aggro has become more of a powerful thing, so they maybe shift more back to like a hard control removal type decks, or things where, I don't know, or it's just going to become an aggro versus aggro meta like it's been for a while. Yeah, those are the top 5 decks since Onyxia's Lair. Thank you very much, and have a great day.